Hey everybody, my name is Laura and I am an alcoholic. And
Hello.
truly by the grace of God, I've been sober since April the 6th of 1987. So I got sober at 17, and I have been sober now twice as long as I was on the planet when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, which is very weird. And I'm probably sober longer than some of you have been alive, which is disturbing. Because I still feel at times like the kid that came to Alcoholics Anonymous. So it's odd to look around the meeting room and realize I could be your mother. But I'll try not to talk like your mother. So it takes me about 15 minutes to say hi. So I have done a lot of prayer before this meeting to make sure that we're not all going to be here for 3 days while I tell you my story. I am from Texas. I got sober in Austin, and I now live west of Austin, about an hour west of Austin. And I heard everybody before the meeting talking about snow. It's going to be 82 here tomorrow. Just saying. That's why I live in Texas, because I don't do snow. Anyway, so what the big book tells me is that it's my responsibility to share in a general way what I used to be like, what happened, and what I'm like now. And I will say this, because there are so many in the meeting, and this is a young people's meeting. A lot of times you hear people in Alcoholics Anonymous say what it used to be like, what happened, and what it's like now. And it was very important for me that when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, they were talking about what we used to be like and not what it used to be like. Because when I got sober in 1987, I was the youngest person in the room by a lot. We had not even had a Texipa. Our young people's convention had not happened ever. I was on the committee for the very first ever Texipa. So they were talking about bankruptcies and divorces and 17 hospitalizations and all of this stuff that had not happened to me yet. So I'm really grateful that I didn't have to have all of that in order to qualify to stay in Alcoholics Anonymous. I started drinking, I started drinking when I was 3. Because I grew up in an alcoholic home, which has nothing to do with me being alcoholic, but I grew up in an alcoholic home, so alcohol was handy. And it was a different time. It was the 60s and 70s, and it was just different. When my folks went to the bar, we went with them. And so alcohol was just a part of our life. And as far as I was concerned, a positive part of our life. I started when I was 6. I always like to tell this story. When I was 6, my mother, who's untreated Al-Anon at that time, had decided I needed to be in Girl Scouts. I don't like girls. I don't like uniforms. I don't like rules. I don't like group participation. So Girl Scouts was sort of the 9th circle of hell for me. And she dropped me off. She usually walked me in because she knew how I was. But she dropped me off one day at the door and said, I'm going to go park. I'll be right back. And I left. I was 6. And I just wandered off in Austin. I went back and drove it later to see how far I actually walked when I was 6. I walked about 2.5 miles to a house where I knew where the kids lived there. And they had a pool and a dog that I liked. So I scaled their back fence and got their dog. I broke into their house and got some tuna fish and some potato chips and their dog and went and hid in the pool house. I was 6. I was uncomfortable in my own skin long before I got to alcoholics, long before I got to alcohol. And I say that to say this, because alcohol was the solution for me. It was a problem my drinking was a problem for others, but my drinking was the solution for me. So when my boss I was in school when I got sober, when the teachers or my friends or the people I was working for would say, you can't drink like that, I quit school. When my parents got into recovery, I was 15 when my parents got into recovery, and they said, you can't drink and live here. So I quit living there. My friend said, we can't be around you if you drink like that. Okay. We're not friends anymore. I go get different friends. Anything that got between me and my solution was eliminated. I could not stand to be who I was doing what I was doing while I was doing it, ever. And alcohol got me out of here. That's what I wanted. Every drink I took, what I was chasing was numb. I heard Yisrael Campbell. If you have never heard Yisrael, do yourself a favor and look him up. He is in Jerusalem now. He got sober at 16 in 1980. So he's been sober 41 years. But I heard him speak today, and he said what he was addicted to was escape. And I love that. I love that. I just want out of here. I just don't want to be me doing what I'm doing. And alcohol was a solution for that. And if alcohol still provided that solution, you'd have a different speaker. I did not mean to get sober. I'd been on the streets, and I was hustling pool and living under a slide. And it was cold, and I was tired. I'm a bar drinker. I'm a bar fighter. I have a big mouth. Caused a lot of problems for me. It gets worse when I drink. It's not that great when I'm sober, but it gets a lot worse when I drink. And so I was in bad shape. My folks had tracked down a friend that knew where I was and said if I wanted help, they would help me. And I did not want help. I did not want to stop drinking. I did not want what my parents had. I had seen Alcoholics Anonymous in my house with my parents, and I didn't want any part of that. But they called and said, if you want help. And I had been in a fight. The side of my head had been caved in by a tire tool because I mouthed off to the wrong person. And I weighed 198 pounds. My face was broken. I was sweating alcohol. I drank around the clock. And I was tired. So what I wanted was rest. That's what I was looking for when my parents offered me help. I wanted to sleep indoors. I wanted to sleep, period, which took some time for me. Sleep was one of the last things that sort of recovered for me. But I did not mean to quit drinking. So my parents sent me to treatment, and then I went to a halfway house in St. Paul, Minnesota. They didn't have adolescent facilities in 1987 in Texas. So I went to an adult treatment facility at 17 and then went to a halfway house in St. Paul. When I got to St. Paul, there were a lot of young people sober in St. Paul. They had sober nightclubs. They had sober bowling alleys. They had sober movie theaters. It was a real thing. And there was a community of us that were young. And for me, I had to stop drinking for a period of time before I started to feel better and realize how bad it had been. And so I went to this halfway house, and I'd been there 118 days, and I had run a con on everybody so I could come back to Austin because it was my dad's AA birthday and whatever. I was just blowing smoke. And I just said what they wanted me to say. I was just burning daylight. I just said what they wanted me to say until I could get back to my friends and my drinking and my running. And I got back to Austin. I got a reprieve, a pass from the halfway house, and came back to Austin and went to Austin Aquafest, which was sort of the precursor to South by Southwest, which is what they have now. Before there was South by Southwest, there was Austin Aquafest. And I went to Austin Aquafest, and Stevie Ray Vaughan was playing, and he stopped playing. I was waiting for my friends to meet me. And he stopped playing and started talking about being clean and sober. And it freaked me out. I thought somebody had called him and told him I was there. It scared me. And I realized when he was talking that I didn't want to go back to that life. But I didn't really want this life either. And so I left and went back to the halfway house and then moved back to Austin. And I went to a meeting every day for 5 years and 2 months. And I know that because I had my first daughter when I was 5 years and 2 months to the day. So I know that's the first day I missed a meeting. And I was very busy. I'm at a hymn We were really not healthy. There was a lot of fighting. There was a lot of insanity. There was a lot of sickness, but we weren't drinking. We were going to a lot of meetings and we weren't drinking. And the end result of that in short order is that I was more uncomfortable not drinking, going to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous than I had ever been drinking. And I really thought that AA didn't work for me. And so I went to a 5:30 meeting and raised my hand and said that. I was 21 years old and 4 years sober, dry. And I was really suicidal. I had had enough. And I knew that the alcohol wasn't going to work. And now Alcoholics Anonymous isn't working. And I didn't know what to do. So I raised my hand and I told him that. And one guy raised his hand and said, "I'll talk to you after the meeting." And just to sort of speed it up, I have no idea how long I've been talking because I forgot to hit my timer. So I think I've been talking about 10 minutes, but we'll go. I got probably 10 more minutes in me. Anyway, one guy raised his hand and said he would talk to me after the meeting. And in short order, what he said to me was that I was a spoiled brat who wanted somebody else to be responsible for my recovery. It hurt my feelings, but it was the truth. And he took me from that day. We made an agreement that I would do every single thing it said to do in the first 164 pages of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if it didn't work, he would finance my drunk. And I signed on the dotted line. I'm in. Because what I thought was I had already done what it said to do in the Big Book, because I had a sponsor who was telling me what to do and I was doing it, getting worse. But we started studying the text and I started attending a Joe and Charlie Big Book study every Tuesday. We would listen to Joe and Charlie for 45 minutes and then we would have a break and then 45 minutes of discussion on what they had covered. And what I found out was that I wasn't doing anything that was in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That sponsor didn't know anything about recovery. And so I started following the directions as they were outlined in the text. And I began to find out what was wrong with me. For 4 years, I sat in meetings in Alcoholics Anonymous and thought what was wrong with me was a drinking problem. That's what I believed. And I couldn't figure out how come when I quit drinking, I didn't get better, I got worse. And as I began to study the text, what I came to understand is that what's wrong with me is a spiritual malady. And when I quit drinking, I had removed my solution for the spiritual malady, and I had not replaced it with another solution. And the fellowship is great. Don't get me wrong. I love the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I would not have survived my first 4 years of sobriety without it. We had a whole pack of crazy people that ran around together. I was by far the youngest because there just weren't any other options. But nonetheless, and during that 4 years, right, we started Texipaw. I went to conferences like crazy. I would not trade for that. That period of time for me was excellent and had tremendous opportunities to be of service, thank God, and was active and involved in my home group. And I just wasn't treating the problem. And so the problem was getting worse. And I was getting worse. The noise in my head was getting louder. I was sleeping less. I was angry. I was doing things in sobriety that I would have done when I was drinking. And, when you're drinking and you do something asinine or operate outside of your value system like I did for so long, people confront you about your behavior and you say, well, I was drunk. When you're in Alcoholics Anonymous and you do that and they confront you about your behavior, you got nothing, right? Just bad behavior. And that's what I had. I had really bad behavior coming to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I started working the steps and following directions. And the first step for me, it says we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. I had never been around anybody that wasn't powerless over alcohol. I didn't hang out with people that didn't drink like I drank. The people in my family were either alcoholics or watchers of the alcoholics. There was no in between. There was no normal social drinking in my 2 square feet. So I didn't know what it looked like to be a normal drinker. And so I thought everybody was powerless over alcohol. And then I started studying the text. And what it tells me is that I've lost the power of choice in drink. And what that means is the first drink makes me thirsty. The second drink takes the edge off a little bit. And the third drink is the money shot. That third drink gets in and it's working. Now things are starting to settle, right? The noise is starting to quiet. The knot in my gut is starting to ease. And I'm starting to feel like it's okay for me to just be here, right? I need to be able to find that in Alcoholics Anonymous, or I can't stay with you. I have to have that kind of solution here. And Clancy, who passed in, I think in August of last year and had been sober since Jesus was a baby, Clancy used to say that Alcoholics Anonymous does for us slowly what alcohol did for us quickly. And I need for that to be true, or I can't stay sober. Because me, untreated, is restless, irritable, discontent. That's kind of cliche. Like, what does that mean? What that means is I wake up in the morning and I'm plotting your demise, right? I wake up in the morning and I am having a conversation with people that aren't in the room, that don't know I'm mad at them, and I am telling them what I think, right? That's how I wake up. Bing, my eyes open and I think, I don't want to. It doesn't even matter what it is, right? I wake up every morning and I just go, no, right? That's my untreated alcoholism. I gotta have a solution for that. And so, and just for the record, I don't wake up like that anymore, but it took about 17 years because I'm slow. The recovery is slow with me. So I gotta have a solution that treats that. And Alcoholics Anonymous, as it's outlined in the first 164 pages of the book, treats that. But I got to be willing to follow those directions. The other thing I want to say before I stop talking is, if you're new, it is so important. It has been critically important in my recovery to have a couple of things. One is a home group, which is hard right now, right? Because everybody's Zooming, right? But pick a meeting, show up early, tell the truth, right? If your hair's on fire and your world's falling apart, so be it, right? One of my heroes in Alcoholics Anonymous is a Jesuit priest in Oakland, California, named Father Tom W. And he says, if you stay sober for very long, you're going to hear you go to a meeting and you're bleeding and on fire, and some idiot in the back of the room will say something spectacular like, if you were really working a program, you wouldn't be bleeding and on fire, right? And that's what we think, and it's a lie. The truth is, if I'm really working a program, I have the tools to stop the bleeding and put out the fire. Bleeding and on fire is life, right? AA is not a get out of jail free card. I'm going to have problems with the kids, problems with marriages, problems with finances. I'm also going to have some of the best friendships I've ever had. I'm going to see miracles happen on a regular basis. I'm going to be able to function like a normal adult on the planet, which is odd. But I can't do any of that if I'm not willing to tell the truth about how I'm doing in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I got to have a group of people that I can tell the truth to. The other thing is sponsorship. In 1998, I had left Austin and moved back. And in 1998, I got a sponsor. His name was Pops. He was an old man, been sober. He hated it when I said he was an old man, but he passed in October, so he can't do anything about it now. But he was an old man, and he was a big book guy, and he was not impressed with me at all. And that is the other thing that is so important. Get a sponsor that is not impressed with you. Get a sponsor that will call you on your shit, right? I regularly, now I'm going to date myself. I may have to pull up an image on Google to show you what I'm talking about. But we used to have phones that were attached to the wall, and they had a handle, and you could slam them down, and it was fantastic, right? And I would hang up with Pops all the time and just slam that phone. And I really miss being able to do that. I really do. Like, the cell phones are cool and handy, but you really lose something with the cell phone that you had with the old phones. He hurt my feelings almost every time I talked to him. The reason I asked him to sponsor me is because he walked up to me after a meeting where I had been talking, and he came straight up to me after the meeting, after we finished the prayer, and he looked me dead in the eye and he said, "Do you have any idea how full of shit you are?" And I said, "Will you sponsor me?" And I'm so grateful I did. He was my sponsor for 22 years, and he knew absolutely everything there was to know about me. I had no secrets with that man. I trusted him with my life over and over and over again. And I told him the first time he ever told me something that didn't work, I was going to fire him. But he never did. And it's invaluable to have that, especially when we're new. Just because we get sober when we're young doesn't mean that we're not going to have life. We're going to have the same struggles that the people who came in later have. We're just going to do it sober, right? Life is life. It's going to happen, right? Alcoholics Anonymous treats the beast that wants me to burn the planet down, right? I'm a bridge burner. I've scorched the earth, right? And Alcoholics Anonymous treats that and allows me to be sober, sane, and useful. And for a drunk like me, that's as good as it's ever going to get. But I also get a host of friends, financial security, right? I'm like on committees in my hometown. It's the weirdest thing, like city council stuff. It's just bizarre. I always want to go to them and be like, maybe I should tell you my story. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not really sure I'm the person that you want to be the treasurer, right? Maybe just, I could just listen. But no, I can show up and do that stuff. I sponsor people. I'm sponsored, right? I'm in the middle of the boat in Alcoholics Anonymous. And the freedom that has afforded me is as simple as this. I sleep at night. I don't have to cross the street to avoid anybody on God's green earth. I'm on good terms with everybody in my family that I want to be on good terms with. Not everybody in my family, but everybody in my family that I want to be on good terms with, I am on good terms with. Some of them need some help. And so it's just this last 34 years has been the most remarkable experience I could ever have imagined. And I am so grateful to have been sober. And I appreciate you guys listening. This is a great, I love that everybody here is so young. I hate that I could be your mother now, but I love that you're here and that you're getting sober. It's the greatest show on dirt. Thanks so much.